Good day. I'm doing this short video just to discuss very briefly some rumours that have been swirling around Kiev over the last couple of days following the sudden resignation of Ukraine's long-standing Interior Minister Arsen Avakov. Now, Avakov has been one of the absolutely central figures in political events in Ukraine ever since the Maidan events of 2014. He was appointed to the post of Interior Minister directly after the transfer of power before elections in Ukraine took place by the provisional government, which took power in Kiev directly after the events which the Russians refer to as the Maidan coup. I've seen some reports that he was appointed Interior Minister by President Poroshenko in 2014 after Poroshenko was elected, but this is actually wrong. Avakov was already Interior Minister when Poroshenko was elected. And when Poroshenko was elected, very interestingly and very importantly, he kept Avakov in post. And when Zelensky replaced Poroshenko after he was elected, he too kept Avakov in post. Now, the fact that this figure, Avakov, has been in power in occupying a central position as Interior Minister for so long suggests that the extent of his political influence and political power. Now, he is known to be a tough hardliner on all issues related to Ukraine and Ukrainianization, and is known to be extremely hostile to Ukraine's formerly close relations with Russia and to Russia as well. He's known to have largely reorganized the police force after the events of 2014 and to have installed his own people throughout the police force in Ukraine. And he's also the person who took the key role right at the start of the events in Ukraine in 2014 to embed within the Ukrainian security services in organizations like the Azov Battalion, which is widely considered across the world to be a far-right organization. So he is a powerful man, a person, a very strongly entrenched man, and one who's exercised great influence in Ukraine, and one who presidents like Poroshenko and Zelensky have been unwilling or perhaps afraid to sack. So what has caused his sacking now, or rather his resignation, as he has said? Well, the short answer is that as of the time of making of this video, we don't know. It could be that Avakov himself, having been in office now for 7 years, has become tired, or perhaps he's ill, or perhaps he's got some personal reasons which have made him decide that he needs to resign. One should never discount that possibility. Always people tend to look for political explanations for unexpected moves of this nature, but sometimes they have actually very banal explanations which are tied to the life of the person involved. So it's possible that this is a decision which he voluntarily took himself for reasons that none of us perhaps can be aware of at the moment. However, it must be said that if that was the case, then I would have thought that we would have had a more clear explanation of Avakov's decision to resign, and not only a more clear explanation of that, but arguably some warmer exchange of words between the President Zelensky and Avakov, some indication that this was indeed a voluntary resignation. So, though the possibility that this was a voluntary resignation undertaken for personal reasons cannot be completely discounted, I have to say that I think it's extremely unlikely. So what other things could have caused it? Well, one possibility, which has been floated in Kiev, is that there is a power struggle underway at the top of the Ukrainian government, that Zelensky's team have been unhappy with the fact that Avakov is there in the government. They see him as a potential rival to support for Zelensky himself, that they're supposedly frustrated that Avakov controls large parts of the Ukrainian security forces, denying Zelensky control of those forces, and that this resignation is somehow a fallout of that battle, that struggle between Avakov and Zelensky. Well, that's possible, but there is something which, to my mind, rather argues against it, which is that Zelensky's position at the moment doesn't look particularly strong in Ukraine. It appears, on the contrary, as if both his popularity and his authority in Ukraine is dwindling, which makes it unlikely, it seems to me, that either he or his team would be able to pressure Avakov into resigning. I would have thought, on the contrary, if there was a power struggle between Zelensky and Avakov at this moment, then it would be Avakov, who, as I said, is very deeply entrenched in the Ukrainian political and security system, that he would be in a stronger position than Zelensky would be, and that in such a power struggle, it would be Avakov who would win, or who would emerge stronger, rather than Zelensky. I just say that. Another possibility that's also been discussed is that it was the US Embassy that pressed for Avakov's removal. As I said, Avakov is somebody who has been around for a very, very long time, who is known to be a strong hardliner, and who is also somebody who is connected in various ways with far-right groups, and who is believed to have been instrumental in incorporating the far-right Azov battalion in the Ukrainian security forces. So there has been this speculation that it was the US Embassy. And I have to say that if the US Embassy were indeed to lobby for the dismissal of a Ukrainian official, a senior Ukrainian official, given the power and reach of the United States in Ukraine at the moment, I do not doubt that it would achieve the resignation or dismissal of that official. I ought to add, by the way, that the current ambassador, US ambassador to Ukraine, is none other than Mr. Kent, one of the witnesses who gave evidence against the former president, the former US President Donald Trump, over the course of his first impeachment proceedings at the end of 2019 and at the beginning of 2020. But that's by the way. Now, if it is the United States that has acted to have Avakov removed, then I would say that it is an interesting fact and something of a change, because, of course, Avakov, whatever else he has been a successful figure from certain points of view. I mean, he has managed to ensure that the government of Ukraine has control over most of the country outside the breakaway republics of the Donbass, places like Donetsk and Lugansk. I mean, there were protests against the government in 2014 in places like Odessa and Kharkiv, and Avakov has been instrumental in suppressing those protests and in making sure that the government remains in tight control, or at least in apparently tight control of the country. So removing someone like Avakov would be a big step for the United States to take, because at one level it removes from power, from the structure of power, a key official who has been instrumental in maintaining in power that government in Ukraine, which the United States has spent so much political capital supporting. Now, why might the United States do that? Well, it's been suggested by some people that it's because Avakov is known to have sympathies for the far right. Well, that's not been a problem for the United States up until now, so I would discount that. It's also been suggested that Avakov is himself corrupt and that he protects various corrupt figures in Ukraine. Well, that's certainly possible, but again, I have to say that it's not been a problem up to now. Third possibility, one which I've noticed has not been discussed, but which is a tantalizing one, is that Avakov is a notable, indeed extreme hardliner on all matters relating to the war in the Donbass and to the confrontation with Russia, and that removing Avakov paves the way, possibly, for some kind of future steps towards a compromise. Now, I say that because the policy that the United States at the moment, or the US administration at the moment, is ostensibly following, is one of seeking a predictable and stable relationship with Russia in Europe, one which will allow the United States to concentrate against China in the Pacific region. And that would argue for the United States wanting peace and quiet in Ukraine. Avakov, a well-known hardliner, might not agree with that approach. He might, on the contrary, be the sort of person who the United States might realistically believe would agitate against peace and quiet in Ukraine. He might be, in fact, the kind of person who would want to launch the same kind of operation that Ukraine seems to have been considering back in the spring, when it assembled 100,000 troops on the contact line with Donetsk and Lugansk, and it seemed for a time as if Ukraine might be on the brink of launching a military attack on those two republics, one which would have resulted in a massive Russian counterstroke which Ukraine would not have survived. So it might be that getting Avakov out of the way is another step taken to try to stabilize the situation with the Russians in Europe, to remove points of conflict so as to free the United States to focus on China. It's a possibility. I have to say, it's not one that I've seen discussed, but if the United States was instrumental in getting Avakov out of the picture, then it seems to me more plausible than the theories that he was removed because of his far-right links, or because of his connections with corruption, or because of his possible protection of other corrupt people in Ukraine that have been much mooted about. However, there is a further possibility, one which doesn't involve the United States at all, and that is that there's been growing rumours of a political crisis in Ukraine, of Zelensky's authority draining away, and of a possibility that sometime in the autumn, protests against him seeking his removal from office will begin and will resume, and that at that point, Avakov wants to be sure that he's not in any way implicated in protecting Zelensky, but will be out of office so that he can presumably use his contacts and his loyalists in the security services in order to facilitate the protests against Zelensky and to engineer his removal. Some Russian commentators talking about all of this have even gone further and have said that a coup, by which they mean an event similar to the one that took place in Maidan in 2014, is now in the process of being prepared, with Poroshenko as the main architect, and that Avakov wants to avoid being caught in the crossfire when that happens, and that is why he's resigned his post. Well, I have to say that that is a possibility, and it is certainly the case that I do get the impression that Zelensky's authority over the last few months has taken a significant hit. After all, he did transfer all those troops to the contact line with the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, and those troops are there still, and by all accounts they're becoming increasingly demoralized and unhappy, and the Ukrainian military is actually apparently decaying whilst the troops are kept indefinitely in the field with nothing much to do. So that is already aggravating, and of course, if Zelensky promised the hardliners at the beginning of this year, as seems overwhelmingly likely, that he would achieve a breakthrough on the Donbass issue this year, then he has clearly failed to deliver on that promise, and the hardliners must be very angry with him, and it would not be a surprise at all if they were now maneuvering to get rid of him. I would add that Zelensky's popular support has fallen rapidly over the course of last year and this year, as he's proved incapable of resolving the economic situation in Ukraine, and as he has gone back on all the promises he made to Russian-speaking Ukrainians to achieve peace with Russia and in eastern Ukraine, and to protect Russian language rights in Ukraine itself. I ought to say, by the way, that Zelensky, it seems to me, is following the pattern of other Ukrainian politicians who get elected to the presidency on the votes of Eastern Russian-speaking Ukrainians, who actually outnumber the hardline anti-Russian Ukrainians in the far west of the country. This has happened before with political figures like Leonid Kuchma, Ukraine's second president, and Viktor Yanukovych, who was the president who was overthrown in 2014. They all come to power promising Eastern Ukrainians that they will actually pursue better relations with Russia and better rights for Russian-speaking Ukrainians in eastern Ukraine. They then become intimidated by the extraordinary hostility they encounter in western Ukraine and back off from these policies of rapprochement with Russia and better rights for Russian-speaking eastern Ukrainians. At that point, their political position, their popularity collapses, and sooner or later, what they find is that all the steps they've taken to appease Western Ukrainians have been ineffective and unsuccessful, and they find that they are then the target of popular mobilization by Western Ukrainians and by their political backers in Kiev, which, as happened in the so-called Orange Revolution of 2003, and has happened in the Maidan events of 2014, result in their expulsion from office. So this is a repeat pattern, and it looks as if Zelensky might be facing something rather like that. However, there is one fact which, to my mind, also argues against this possibility of Avakov wanting to resign so that he is not implicated directly in any attempt by Zelensky to hold on to power, which is that if he is indeed part of this coup plot, then I would have thought the coup plotters would prefer to have him in place so that he could turn the police against Zelensky and engineer his removal. I also have to say that I cannot imagine that either the United States or Germany would be happy to see a repeat of the events of 2014 happen this year in Ukraine, with Zelensky being removed from power and a more hardline figure taking over from him. It would suggest that the entire experiment of political consolidation and democratization in Ukraine that they have been pursuing has failed, and it would again emphasize and re-emphasize what a deeply unstable and divided country Ukraine appears to be. So I'm not sure that the Americans and the Germans would be happy with these plans, and I would have thought that if they were underway, if there were these plans being hatched, the Americans and the Germans would oppose them. But that doesn't, of course, mean that hardliners in Ukraine might not still act on their own and pursue these kind of plans by themselves. Anyway, there we are. We don't really know why Avakov has resigned. It could be, as I said, related to all of these things. It could be disgust with Zelensky. It could be anger over Nord Stream 2. It could be many things. But one thing I think everybody is in agreement about, and that is that Avakov's resignation or removal has weakened the Ukrainian power structure at a particularly sensitive time. He was, as I said, the key figure keeping the government in Kiev in control of all the scattered places in Ukraine, many of which are known to be restive or unhappy about the political course the government in Kiev has been following. Removing such a figure from the scene and replacing him with someone else who will not have his authority and is unlikely to have his influence is something which suggests to me a weakening of the central power structure in Ukraine. If Zelensky engineered it, or if the Americans did, they may find that they miss Avakov because of the key role he played in preserving the political structures. If, on the other hand, it is someone like Poroshenko, who is plotting a coup, who has persuaded Avakov to resign, well, he too perhaps should be careful what he wishes for. He might, without Avakov, find it easier to remove Zelensky in a political crisis in the autumn, but there has to be a possibility that engineering a crisis like that without someone like Avakov in charge of the police could open up all kinds of problems in places like Odessa, Kharkiv, and who knows, perhaps many other places too. Anyway, we shall see. A very speculative video I've just made. I don't pretend to know the answer to all of these questions. Time will no doubt provide the answers, but it's certainly interesting to see this rather interesting and important man, Avakov, depart the scene, at least for the moment, though I think it is highly likely that we will see him back before very long. Thank you very much for joining me for this program today. I look forward to you joining me in future programs, both on this channel and on our main channel, the Duran, where I do programs with my colleague and friend, Alex Christoforou. Please also join us. Please also remember to check out Alex's channel. You find videos, you find links under this video. And please also remember to join us on our other platforms, BitChute, SuperU, and Locals. And by the way, we have some interesting thoughts and ideas which we're working on about how we can improve our service on Locals especially. So please keep an eye out on what we're doing on those channels. And also, please, to the extent that you can, support us via PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar, and also assist us and also benefit for yourself by going to our shop and buying the amazing things you will find there. Our amazing magic mugs, our t-shirts, our hats, our hoodies, our sweatshirts, and all the rest. And thank you for joining me today for this short program. Please tick the like button if you liked this video, and please also remember to check your subscription to this channel. And thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to you joining me again soon, and have a wonderful day until then.